My name's Sam. I'm like a vicar, priest, pastor, whatever you want to call me, based at Holy Trinity Brompton, which is an Anglican church in London. I've been on the team there for about 4 years, and I look after the student ministry for HTB. Yeah, and we have kind of weekly gatherings for students, loads of stuff going on in the week, kind of trying to, look after, equip, bless students across the city of London. I am married to the wonderful Rhiannon. We've been married for nearly 8 years now. And we have a little 18-month-old boy called Toby, who's an absolute delight and also a menace in lockdown. But he's wonderful and loving having extra time with him, which is great. But yeah, I've been asked to speak a little bit about connection this afternoon. I don't know how you're finding it, connecting with people under lockdown. I think some people are finding it really hard to keep in touch. Me personally, I've always been pretty terrible at keeping in touch with friends anyway. So this is new territory in the sense that I don't have any excuses for not replying to texts, yet somehow still I seem to be doing a terrible job. I kind of read them on notifications and then ignore them for however long because I'm busy doing nothing. But there we go. I've been asked to speak about connection, and I think given everything that's going on, it's a really important moment to be talking about connection. Like around the world, there are millions of us currently who are separated from loved ones. We're conducting our relationships over technology rather than in person. And actually many of us won't have even felt the physical touch of another human being for months. And I think that given the way that we would normally live life, that is a profound thing and a significant moment. And I think we'd all agree that connection is so important for human flourishing. Research shows us that a lack of human connection can actually be more harmful to your health than obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure. Social connection actually lowers anxiety and depression. It helps us to regulate our emotions. It leads to higher self-esteem and empathy, and actually is proven to improve our immune systems. So this connection is so important. But it's not just the research, is it? I think we know it in our gut as well. We know it from our own experience that human connection is so important for us as human beings. And if you ask people what they want in life, I think connection with loved ones will always be right up there as something that people are seeking for and would want to be core in their life. And even some of the material things that we may think that we want, like money, power, fame, beauty, actually at the root of most of these desires is simply a deeper need to belong, to be accepted, to be loved, to connect with people. So the need to connect is at the core of what it is to be human. If we're to flourish, then we need connection, and without connection, we suffer. But here's what I want to talk about with you briefly today. I am convinced that every single one of us can know the deepest and greatest connection, no matter our circumstance. I'm convinced that every single one of us can know the deepest and greatest connection, no matter our circumstance. Even in total isolation, I believe that you can experience the deepest connection possible. And that's what I want to talk about. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself before we get right into it. I've always lived in the UK, though we moved around a fair bit because of my dad's job. I studied physics at Nottingham University, so shout out to you scientists. And then I went straight to Cambridge to study theology, so shout out to any theologians. And then after studying theology, I was then ordained in the Church of England, so vicar, pastor, priest, whatever you want to call me. And I spend a lot of my time now, because of my job, speaking with lots of different people, all about the person of Jesus. And what I want to share with you today are just a few key ideas from Jesus's teaching that I've seen transform people's lives in this area and also have made a massive difference in my life. So if it's all right, I'm just going to read a little bit to you from the Bible. And this comes from John's historical account of Jesus's life in chapter 15. I'm just going to read a little bit, and then I want to draw out a few things of what Jesus is saying here. This is Jesus speaking to us here in this section. He says this: I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. So in this little passage, we see Jesus using this image of a grapevine, using the picture as an analogy of a grapevine. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. And as you know, the vine on a grapevine, it delivers the nutrients to the branches that then enables the branches in turn to bear fruit. If the branches are disconnected from the vine, if they're cut off, they wither and die. But if they remain connected, then they flourish. And Jesus is saying, I have something. I am the source of everything that you're looking for from connection. So if you connect to me, you will flourish. Not only will you be healthy, but you will bear fruit. You will achieve good things. There will be growth in your life. You will have purpose. If you connect with me, you will flourish. Do you want purpose? Do you want to flourish? Then connect to the vine. Connect to Jesus. But how can he say this? What possibly means that he is the source of all of this while another isn't? Well, that comes down to love. The central transformational aspect of connection is love. Well, we don't seek connection for connection's sake. The thing that actually makes the difference is to be loved when we know that we are loved. And here Jesus is saying that he loves you. That he loves you so much. In fact, he puts a measure on how much. It says here in verse 13, he says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And that is exactly what he did for you. He laid down his own life for your sake. That's the love that he has for you. He also says here that he calls you friend. And this is a big deal. This isn't most people's picture of God. I think often when we think of God, we might think of like a cosmic policeman keeping us in check and smiting people who step out of line, or perhaps an angry old man, or an absent, distant God who's not interested at all. But no, Jesus here, he says that he calls you friend. He's looking for friendship with you. And this connection that I talked about at the start, the greatest connection ever known, this connection is available to you in any circumstance. And this connection, it's friendship with Jesus. I encountered Jesus when I was 12 years old. I grew up in a Christian family, so I was surrounded by kind of the information about Christian faith. But my parents were really careful to never force anything upon me, and kind of left me to make my own choice, which I really appreciated from them. And there was this one day I'd been to an event with a few of my friends at church. I went along because I enjoyed hanging out with them. And someone had given a talk a little bit similar to this, and had talked about the fact that God was interested in friendship with us, in personal relationship with us. And I just thought, okay, if this is true, then I probably ought to be interested in this. I probably ought to explore a little bit. So I went off on my own, and I sat down, and I just took a moment, and I prayed. And I don't know if I'd prayed much before. If I had, I'm not even sure what I was praying for or to whom. But at this point, I sat down and I prayed, and I said, okay, God, if you're there, and if you're interested in a relationship with me, if you love me, as these people have said, then would you come and... I waited a moment, and then suddenly I was filled with this incredible sense of love. I had this warmth deep in my chest, and I felt total peace. Suddenly, it was like I knew I was loved. And not only did I know it in my head, I could feel it in my heart. Kind of weird, but it's what happened to me, is that I experienced God's love when I invited him to come and reveal it to me. And in this moment, it was like a wake-up call. It was like the stuff that I kind of picked up from being around church and around my parents that I kind of knew in my head but hadn't really thought much about. Suddenly it was like, oh my goodness, God is real and he's interested in a relationship with me. I should start to put this into practice. So this moment began this journey into friendship with Jesus. And that's what I'd say that I have now and that I've had for many, many years is I know this deep connection with him every day. He truly is the vine of my life. And when I come to him, when I spend time with him, when I look to him for purpose in my life, when I look to him for peace, for wholeness, for fulfillment, I find that everything I need is in him. By being connected to him, connected to the vine, I am full. I feel full and my life is full. Now, it doesn't mean that life is completely easy. Life hasn't been perfect. I've not had, it's not like suddenly I decided to be in friendship with Jesus and everything turned around and I had the perfect life. But even in the toughest times, I've been able to walk through those in friendship with Jesus. And I've known him bring about amazing things in my life and bring peace in my life. So in him, I know that I'm loved just as I am. He knows me completely. He loves me completely. He guides me in the right way. And I'm always seeking to live a life that pleases him and that blesses others. And I think one of the most significant things about this in this current season is that I am never alone. Even on the hardest days when I don't know what to do, he is there with me, walking with me as my friend. And whether or not you've heard it articulated like this before, this is actually the experience of many people on this call, along with 2.3 billion other people around the world who would attest to having friendship with Jesus. And so if you've never experienced connection with Jesus, then just before I end, I actually want to encourage you to consider doing two things. The first thing is I want to encourage you to do a bit more research. Even if you're not convinced, even if you think, okay, Sam, he might, he's just some random guy who's coming to school. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he's talking about. If this is true, surely it's worth exploring a little bit. So I want to encourage you, read a little bit of the Bible. Perhaps Mark's Gospel. It's like a historic record of the life of Jesus. Look at the facts for yourself about who Jesus really is and explore it. Because if you can have relationship with the creator of the universe, if you can have friendship with God, and it really is everything that I've said it's going to be, surely it's worth a little bit of an exploration. But secondly, I'd also like to encourage you to think about doing what I did. Maybe after this call, go and find somewhere quiet, just take 10 minutes, get yourself comfortable, and then invite Jesus to come and meet with you. Say, God, if you're there, come and meet with me. And I firmly believe, that you'll find the greatest connection that you could ever know. I'm going to leave it right there because I think we're going to have some time for questions. So I want to leave time for that. And I'm going to hand back over. But thank you so much for listening, and let's fire some good questions at me. I'd love to see what you've got to say.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for the talk. Okay, everyone. So welcome back. So far, we have got 6 questions. Yeah, so I do hope we have time to let Sam to answer all of them. So the first question that we have is, why do we still need church or fellowship with other Christians, even we only need to connect? Sorry, why do we still need church or fellowship with other Christians if we only need to connect with God?
Yeah, great question. Really good question. And obviously, as with anything, the talk, when you're working with a short space of time, you're kind of simplifying, and everything that we need, we can find in Jesus. He is absolutely everything. He provide all that we need. And so, if we find ourselves in a situation where we are completely cut off from everybody else, we have everything that we need in Jesus. However, God's desire for our life is that we live in community with others. It's that we do connect with other people, and He's made us to be people who connect with people. There's something beautiful about the breadth of diversity in our world. So many different people, and the interactions that we can have together, the relationships that we can build together. We were made both to love God and to know His love, but also to love one another and to know the love of others. And even in this passage that I was looking at, Jesus, it's totally it's like inextricable. He's talking about the love that He has for us and the love that God has for us, but also telling us, now go and love one another, show love to one another in the same way that I've loved you. It's like the natural overflow as we receive God's love. Actually, it's like we're filled up with love and it overflows out of us. And so, you specifically, whoever asked the question specifically mentioned going to church. As Christians, we think going to church is really important. Firstly, because actually there's the fellowship with other Christians helps us to connect with God. Actually, he chooses to us and to work in our lives. He chooses to use other Christians to bless us, to encourage us, to build us up. But also, secondly, we go because we can be a blessing to other people. And actually, we Jesus invites us to join in with all that He's doing in the world, to share in that and to bring about good in other people's lives. He wants to use us to bless other people. And so I think, connection with other people is so important. Firstly, God uses other people to encourage us, to build us up, but also He wants to use us to bless other people, to show love to them, to serve them, and to see them flourish as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is, if true connectedness is found with Christ, should that be all I need in a time like this? How important are other relationships? Do I need them?
Yeah, I think that's similarly to what I just said. I think those relationships are absolutely key because God wants to use them to bless us, and He wants to use us to bless others. I think in this moment, it's like God's given us brains for good reason. He expects us to use what it is that's actually going to help keep us healthy in this time. I think there's certain things that we're going to do in this time that are just sensible and wise to do, and that God will want us to do, like making sure we're doing enough exercise, eating well, connecting with other people, and they are all really important things. But I think there are a few things. I think that the significant point is that there are a few things that actually come where we can only find them in Jesus, and ultimately we can only find them in an extent that will fully satisfy us in Jesus. Only He loves us completely, and will never let us down, will never fail us, even where others don't want to. Actually, as humans, we're broken, we're fallen, we make mistakes, we end up hurting one another. That will never happen in Jesus. And where other people can give us strength to an extent, with their encouragement, with their love for us, actually Jesus has, Jesus has all resource, all power. He actually is able to give us everything that we need. And because of his goodness, his advice, his wisdom is perfect. He's able to lead us in a life that is totally fulfilled in a way that other people, we're all figuring, we're all trying to work out how to work through life, and but Jesus has all wisdom and is to fullness and fruitfulness in a way that.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next one is, if I want to connect with God, but I don't want to give up my independence, what should I do?
It's a great question. Really great question. Lots of layers in there. So when we connect, if we make a decision to follow Jesus, which is the decision that all Christians have made, is that actually we're going to let our lives be led by Jesus, then we are handing over a level of control for our lives. We're saying, actually, I'm no longer going to be the number one authority in my life. I'm not going to just do what I want. Instead, I'm going to trust that Jesus knows best for my life. And if Jesus was just some random guy who we're choosing to let just govern our lives, then yeah, it sounds like a bit of a silly decision to make. And we could be led down all sorts of paths. But if Jesus is completely good, and if he completely loves us and has our best interests at heart, then where our desires and his plans for our life are slightly different, actually, we can trust that his desire for our life is going to be the very best for us and for those around us as well. And so I've not found that following Jesus and allowing him to shape and to lead my life has meant that things have been worse for me. Quite the opposite. I found that everything is completely better. And that often on the moments where I would have done one thing, but I know that Jesus would rather I do another, I don't regret that decision. Actually, down the line, I look back and I think, thank goodness, I did what I knew Jesus would have me do. And we see all through the Bible, actually, Jesus is teaching this is about what is good and right for human beings. You know, it's don't kill people. It's don't be filled with pride. It's love your neighbor, love your enemy. It is all about the good and the flourishing of people, and ultimately is the way that I aspire to live. And so I don't, yes, in the one sense, there's a little bit of a loss of independence in that I'm not just doing what I want. But actually, I find there's an enormous freedom in the fact that I no longer need to worry about making sure I've made the exact right decision. Instead, I'm able to follow in the footsteps of one who is infinitely wiser and greater than me, and who I've already discovered in my life leads me into better things than I ever could have brought about for myself. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Another question is, how do we stay connected to God as a father and a friend when we struggle to feel his presence?
Yeah, really good question. Really good question. And my personal experience and kind of story and walk with Jesus is one where I've been very blessed to be aware of his presence from that young age and continuing on through. And I know lots of people for whom that kind of experience is pretty rare. It certainly happens, but is less frequent than me. And yeah, that is absolutely not the only way that God wants to connect with us and that God chooses to meet with us. There are so many other ways. One of the key ways is through the Bible. Actually, as we read the Bible, it is God's word to us, and we can hear him speaking to us in the words of Scripture. And so I find often actually that kind of tangible sense of God's presence, that's not the thing that really feeds me and is like being connected into the vine. Actually, it's as I read the Bible and I hear what God has to say into my life, that's the place that I'm really fed. There's also some people find that they particularly connect with God through what we call worship, kind of singing songs to God of thanks and praise to him. And actually, it's funny, it's as we acknowledge him in that way and kind of bring ourselves before God in that way that actually we find ourselves in connection with him in that way. And then also actually through the encouragement of other Christians. That's been massive for me. And this is a little bit of what I was saying earlier about why it is so important that we're connecting with other people. Is actually often others are able to speak the wisdom of God into my life in a way that helps me feel significantly more connected to God. I have 3 friends who are all vicars, priests like me. And we get together regularly to hang out with one another, to encourage one another, to pray together, to read the Bible together. And when I come away from a day with them, I feel so alive and so close to God because I've been around these godly men who are, also chasing after Jesus, trying to live lives that please Jesus. And they've spent so much time with Jesus themselves that it's like they bring Jesus's presence to me as well.
Thank you. This is the last question. If God is so loving, then why does he sometimes seem harsh in the Old Testament?
Another great question. Another great question. Yeah, I think there's a common view that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are like totally inconsistent. And actually, I think that I'd like to contest that view a little bit. And that's actually on both sides. I think that the God of the Old Testament is incredibly gracious and loving. You know, the kind of, at least the picture of the God that we see in the Old Testament, actually we see real mercy and love for his people. And also in the New Testament, we see that God gets annoyed about injustice, where wrong things have been done, where people have been hurt. He gets angry and he responds. Now there is a difference. There's definitely a difference in the context and in the way that those different texts are written, and a lot of that has to do with the historical context. Both we see lots of like history of battles and nations being wiped out and that kind of thing in the historical records of the Old Testament that we don't see in the New Testament. In the New Testament, it's focusing more on the life of Jesus, of the early followers of Jesus, and kind of early churches. But actually, a lot of it also has to do with the lens through which we're seeing things. The New Testament is all kind of written around the life of Jesus and beyond. And what we see in Jesus is this marked moment where, because of what Jesus has done for us on the cross, where he gave his life for you and for me, actually any of the consequences of the wrongdoing that we've done are now forgiven and taken, paid for by Jesus. And so there's like this door is opened to us into God's mercy in a totally new way through what happened on the cross. It's actually through what Jesus did on the cross that we're able to receive his mercy. So a lot of the New Testament is written through that lens of, now that Jesus has lived, died, and risen again, that actually is written through that perspective. But it's really clear, it's made really clear in Scripture, that everything that we see in Jesus, he is the picture of who God is. We see the fullness of God in the person of Jesus. And so if you look at Jesus, actually, that even when the God of the Old Testament may look like it doesn't quite add up, actually there's something contextual going on, or we're not seeing the full picture. We see the fullness in Jesus Christ. And so I would look at him and his teaching and his goodness, his mercy, his love for others, his desire to heal, also his desire to stand up against those who are oppressed, those who were poor. But all of these things that we see in Jesus, they are the God of the Old and the New Testament. That is who God is. That is his nature, and it hasn't changed.
Okay. So once again, thank you, Sam, for coming to talk to us and also answering all our questions.